Now let's take a closer look at the initiatives being rolled out from this year's budget for Singaporeans.
Announced in 2018 that we plan to raise the GST by 2 percentage points to 9% sometime from 2021 to 2025. This is to raise recurrent revenues to meet our recurrent spending, particularly for healthcare. After reviewing our revenue and expenditure projections and considering the current state of the economy, I've decided that the GST increase will not take effect in 2021. In other words, the GST rate will remain at 7% in 2021.
So under the assurance package for GST, every adult Singaporean will receive a cash payout of $700 to $1,600 over 5 years. And I think quite a few people were relieved that the GST hike was put on hold for now, but we did see a $6 billion figure in this year's budget that's being pulled out now for use later on. Alvin, I know that you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, of course, it initially came across a bit, the timing was a bit off for me that you postponed the the GST hike, but then you put into a package. But of course, it's a preemptive measure in that sense that you were going to offset. And it's also probably a quite clear signal that the deferment is temporary because of short-term disturbances or shocks in the...
Have we seen a measure like this before?
Frankly, I don't remember so, but if you compare it, the comparison I heard was that, think of it like the Merdeka package, that it was being delivered across the years. But of course, this is to defer a GST hike that is not taking place yet. So I guess there is still, to me, quite a material difference.
Yeah, I think the message is giving assurance to the Singaporeans that in these difficult, challenging times, the GST hike is not going to happen in 2021, but in other years that come along. And also give the assurance to the Singaporeans that the help is on the way in terms of GST vouchers and other things. So these play a very important psychological effect in when everything's challenging and not going very well.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean it's a very big package. 6 billion is a lot of money, and you would have to split it up. You can't give it all at once. So you'd have to do some this year, some next year, and some the year after. And by doing it this way, you're able to be much more generous in what you give out. So for example, there are offsets for everybody, but there's special offsets for certain categories of people. So like I think the lower income people get 10-year offsets for GST. So you're able to do this because you're able to have a big package, and if you have a big package, you have to spread it out.
I think the issue of a GST rise will certainly emerge in an election, which is due quite soon. I think, well, we certainly know it has to be held by April next year. And so by saying to Singaporeans that there is this offset package, it's locked away, I think it'll change the debate a little bit, because politicians will be saying, well, there's going to be this GST rise, how will you be affected? Well, then the answer from the PAP camp is to say, this is how we are going to help you. And we maintain the framework of the fiscal policy being not regressive, but one that is progressive, in the sense that those who are in lower income households will be helped even more. But there is a broad-based offset. So it changes the political discussion a little bit. It doesn't, it sort of isn't just left hanging, where opposition politicians go, well, what's going to happen to you if there's a GST rise?
That's a good
the
point.
The PAP
Yeah.
actually says we've maintained our principle that it's not a regressive move. We always have to see this as a fiscal package.
And so they've called this a unity budget. Would you also call this an election budget then?
Well, as I said earlier, I think that whatever help is given to demonstrate by the government that it's concerned for all segments of Singapore, whether it's a COVID situation, which is short term, but longer term, there's all that help with education, preschool, certainly right up to tertiary education, and also with retirement. I think these are all things that the PAP government would want to signal to say that there is concern for everyone, and it'll be helpful for short term as well as long term, as well as come that day, polling day, helpful for an election as well.
Okay, now, earlier we spoke about the need to upskill the workforce, and I know we mentioned it briefly during the COVID-19 discussion earlier on, and a new Skills Future Enterprise Credit has been announced. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, to me, if you are not just focusing on the employer, but just employee, but you're now targeting on the other side of the equation, which probably makes sense, that try to incentivize the employer to look at this as not just benefiting the employee, or you give them the illusion, the idea that his skills are better, then it will better benefit your company. But now you're doing something financially tangible to them to incentivize them. I think that's a good way of at least pushing this plan forward, both from the employee side and the employer side.
This is to tackle the issue from the demand and the supply side, so that the employers will find incentivized and encouraged to employ all these workers.
But I don't see this budget as just us trying to sustain what is the pie at the moment. I think even when you look at the green part of it, on sustainability, there's a bigger, bolder move to develop green technologies, the green industry in Singapore. And I think you needed to create the demand. So discussion about electric vehicles, in addition to everything else, is going to be helpful. It's just a new way to look for another rocket for the economy, and certainly this one is hopefully not going to be polluting. It's going to be doing the opposite of that. So it's looking at what the challenges are and trying to find opportunities within that.
That's right.
But just to come back to Skills Future, I mean, I think my only grouse about that is that it's a periodic thing. It's as and when the government decides to top up, they top up. It's not an annual thing that's done automatically. And I think that might be better, because I think you're going to have a lot of people having to retrain all the time, because the economy is changing, the whole nature of jobs is changing, and it's happening continuously.
But there are so many schemes, adapt and grow and so on and so forth.
That's true. But I think for reskilling, I think reskilling is central. And the decision is yours. It's your decision.
You take accountability.
You're accountable for this.
You take accountability.
But I think I'm encouraged by the fact that the finance minister has done something extra for the 40-plus age group. Right? There's an extra Skills Future credit for them, and they are probably in most need of reskilling. I mean, they're the ones who are facing obsolescence in terms of their skills.
Career transformation and for new jobs, new industries, I think that's quite important to look at. So it isn't just Skills Future to do something that we are already doing,
but you also have to
do something
on
new.
What kind of courses or training that you are enrolling yourself into? It must be digital training, it must be green tech training, it must be relevant to the new economy. Cybersecurity, cloud computing,
hopefully. I mean, if you're going to train yourself, you're going to train yourself in something relevant, right?
Developing industries.
Yes, but then there's always the limitations of how a 40 to 60-year-old person may be able to adapt into a lot of industries. So I think, personally, I thought to be mindful that there should be a broader range in terms of, these are really places where you can find your next unicorn to shoot Singapore into the next level. But beyond that, if you're looking at just for the 40 and 60s, just for employability, right? Perhaps there should be opening of other sectors. I thought the sectors of we are already aging in a quite a big way here. So maybe there are sectors that should focus on those.
Yeah.
And there were a number of
Yeah.
support measures introduced for our older workers as well,
Correct.
as part of this year's budget. But I believe we've got some questions coming in from social media. Dylan, what have you got for us?
Well, thanks, Rachel. Now, welcome back to Social Media Watch. Of course, do remember to continue keep your questions coming. We are monitoring them and use the hashtag SGBudget2020. Now, it's true, we have a couple of very interesting comments now from the public. Now, the first one we have is from Scarlett Chew, who asked the question, will incentives be enough to persuade companies to keep older workers in white-collar jobs? Now, we also have Twitter user Alan So, who also has some concerns about skills upgrading. He actually expressed his happiness about the news. Now, he said another $500 in the skills future credit top-up. I haven't even used my initial $500 credits. Yay, LOL. Now, yeah, so a couple of very interesting ones. I even have one more from Gary Goh, who talks about the support for senior workers. Now, the senior worker support package, the senior employment credit, senior worker early adopter grant, etc. Is it enough to encourage companies to hire or keep older workers, and whether or not it can combat against ageism that seems quite prevalent? Rachel?
I know, Gillian, we were talking about this earlier. What are your thoughts on the packages that have been introduced for our older workers?
It's good that we have them to begin with.
Yeah.
And I think the government's had many measures introduced to try and make the workplace more friendly for senior workers, and also have the special employment credit for older workers, which now been rejigged as the senior employment credit scheme. So I think paired with retraining, I think then there is more scope for employers to kind of envisage keeping their workers on board with them as they grow and they move into new activities. So I think it's better that we have it than not, and I think that's quite important. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's also a benefit of staying longer in the workforce and be healthier.
Yeah. But you also tapping on the experience, the markets that
right.
the senior workers know, even if the activities might be different. So
this is also one way to increase your tax base. As more people continue to work longer, your tax base is more.
Yeah.
So that will help to increase your fiscal surplus.
But I thought it's a very good question, because I think ageism is very deep-rooted in corporate cultures in Singapore. And I think it's a fair question to ask, are these incentives good enough to root out this attitude? I mean, will a few dollars in savings, will that be enough to persuade companies to keep hiring older workers? And I'm not sure, I think you do need some kind of a mindset change towards older workers. And this will help. As Gillian says, it's better to have it than not to have it. But is it enough? I'm not sure it is enough. But what can help is that the things that go with it. There is incentives for upskilling or reskilling workers. Not only Skills Future, but incentives to companies to upskill their workers and reskill their workers. I mean, this is the problem, because as I mentioned in the pre-budget discussion, less than 15% of SMEs invest in training of their existing employees. Now, what happens to the older employees who work for those companies? They don't get retrained, and they get basically redundant.
But do you feel as a part, we've had a number of measures over the last few years. Do you feel that attitudes are changing?
I haven't noticed myself any major change.
There was a survey recently done that people felt that by the age of 48 they could see that there was wage stagnation and they were being treated as senior workers at age 48. That's really crazy. IPS did a survey 2 years ago, and about 66% of the 2,000 people we asked said that they could see ageism in the workplace, and it was there. So that's quite important. But what's the bigger picture? There's a tightening on how many foreign workers we'll take in. as a Singapore system. So that's going to be an even leaner labor situation. So you're going to have that, which means that employers are going to be fighting for manpower. If you're fighting for manpower, don't you think you'd rather retain senior workers who are actually, they don't grow decrepit just because they turn 55 or 48 for that matter. And so with the tightening of that workforce situation, you're going to be in itself market driven, needing to really retain as many senior workers that you've had with you for a longer time, and then the question is just making them able to keep up and take the new jobs that you are presumably introducing or needing to change to with the introduction of technology and
totally agree
things like
with you,
that.
and also Vikram, right? I've seen some of my clients actually they continue to redeploy all the older workers,
right?
To automation, job redesign.
Yep.
And they find that with their wealth of experience, these people actually can contribute. They actually can contribute even better than the younger workers.
So the scheme to help early adopters, I think that incentivizes people who want to go forward and say, I'm going to do it better than anyone else. They will then secure that talent or keep it in place.
I think I want to put it that all these measures are supposed to complement each other in that sense. I mean, in the past when we have very free labor law that have bring in a lot of foreign, and that have boosted a lot of sectors, right, but at the expense of the imbalances in the labor market. And in a way, we are undoing some of this, but at the same time, I do see that if you encourage reskilling for the older workers, at the same time you tighten the foreign workers, and at the same time you try to encourage companies, right? All the combination, right, will allow not just about older workers being employed longer, but I think companies are more willing to take on automation, which is also a point of resistance. If you can keep on doing the same thing, right? Why do you need to spend a huge amount of capital outlay for automation?
It's just that the overall framework is that there's not going to be any way to tap outside input in terms of manpower supply. So if you keep that very tight, then I think the employers are going to be forced to restructure and take all the help to automate, to change processes, to do new things and bring in
schemes and incentives come into play. How to improve the productivity at the early stage.
At the end of the pier itself, right? If you tighten it too much and you try to do this forcing, right? If I have to think of whether I'm doing it in Singapore or any parts of Asia, I might have to rethink that again. So that becomes another part.
You can also outsource.
Yes. During the ST clip we saw earlier in the show, and there were mention of programs for perhaps female workers, flexible working programs. But I think let's move on to the next topic. And just as a recap, slowing global economies, trade tension and artificial intelligence. And artificial disruption and climate change, these are just some of the issues that will impact the economy and businesses going forward. And during his speech, Minister Heng introduced a number of measures to combat these. Let's hear more.
2 years ago, I set out our vision of Singapore as a global Asia node of technology, innovation, and enterprise. To support this vision, in this budget, I will introduce a set of measures to drive our transformation and growth strategy. There are 3 key thrusts. First, enabling stronger partnerships. Second, deepening enterprise capabilities. Third, developing our people. Including sums allocated in previous years, I'm allocating a total of $8.3 billion over the next 3 years to enable transformation and growth.
So transformation and growth packages amounting to $8.3 billion over 3 years have been announced. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think, it's striking that this is bigger. This is the biggest part of the budget. Right?
Bigger than COVID-19.
Bigger than COVID-19, although COVID-19 is limited, but still, this is a significant part of the budget. So which suggests that you can't press the pause button on transformation. just because you have a COVID crisis. You have to continue, you have to keep going. So you have to keep boosting skills, you have to incentivize companies, you have to have partnerships between industry and research. You have to keep continuing to support your startups, and now they've shifted the emphasis to deep tech startups, which is interesting. And they've expanded their existing programs such as Go Digital and so on, which encourages digital adoption. So these things have to continue. I mean, these things, the world is not going to stop, you know. So I think we have, I think it's very good that they've put so much emphasis on continuing with these initiatives. Yeah.
What I like about this part is that they actually make a differentiation between different stages of growth for the enterprises and have targeted incentives for growth stage, infant stage, and mature companies. So it's very targeted. Yeah, the scheme.
That's what I was going to ask, because transformation was a key element of your proposal. With this 8.3 billion package, I mean, and businesses looking at digital disruption and so many other elements on the horizon, are they ready to tackle these now with this package? I'm
sure with such a big amount set aside, enterprises will be very happy to really embark on make use of all these packages. Yeah. So the basic thing is that with all this help, enterprises will accelerate much faster and be able to compete globally or regionally. You see, if you can transform well, your product and solution can be exported, right, from Singapore, and that will become a self-sustained model in future for the company itself. And then when the company becomes profitable, the government will be able to collect more taxes. That is a natural thing to do, and it becomes a self-funding kind of system going forward. So transformation is very important.
My only concern, though, is what is the take-up of these different schemes? You know,
how
I mean, there are so many schemes
now. SMEs to
so many schemes that it'll be good to know how to what extent companies are actually taking advantage of them.
And from your clients,
this includes, you can. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, and that's our job actually. So sometimes we ourselves also get a bit confused with the slew of incentives. So what we normally do is we do an analysis with the client. What are their needs at the various stage of their development? But there are, apart from professionals like ourselves, there are also trade associations, business association, TACs that can offer all this counseling, talking, and meetings with all these companies, and also ESG, all the agencies. But you're right, the dissemination, the awareness has to be much broader and deeper.
Is there still hesitance on the ground?
Doing more on that area. I think they recognize that there is a lot of schemes available, but the take-up, some companies, if they can be your client, I'm quite sure they have enough capital to embark on some course. But for the smaller companies, right, there lies the problem. How do they know what schemes are available for them? And I think the government, I believe they already have set up departments trying to give better access to information to SMEs, and that probably can be enhanced to help that segment that probably needs the most of this help in the first place.
So I think it's actually, maybe there needs to be a shift of emphasis. Instead of coming up with more and more schemes, you just try and increase the uptake of existing schemes. And this extends also to the industry transformation maps. You talk to a lot of small companies and they say, we don't understand what these are. You know, they haven't figured out how they can get involved in these ITMs. You know, there are 23 of them. So I think outreach, education, all those things really need to be emphasized, rather than just keeping on producing more and more schemes and expanding them.
And especially during difficult times when a lot of companies are just trying to keep their head above water and, you know, keep business going. Looking to, you know, find out more about different schemes might be a bit of a challenge. So it's, you know, time to tap the experts.
Quite interesting, because when you talk about experts, I think there's a new program introduced called the Executive in Residence program. So presumably these are sort of business mentors who are introduced to enterprises to help them plan, to strategize, and get your input on how to tap some of these grants. There's also one very interesting, the equivalent for the heartlands. So I think there are the heartland shopkeepers or hawker associations, and they're not left out, you see. So that's quite interesting, because we're not just talking about high value add, international firms, export oriented, but also the local retailers, and the domestic economy has some focus in this budget.
Okay, and there was just one more question that I wanted to ask for this segment, because looking at the workforce, we saw that the budget announced a reduction in the SPAS dependency ratio ceiling for construction, marine, shipyard processes from 20% to 15%. What are your thoughts on that?
I was a bit surprised when I read that, because for the later passages, they did say that they are not applying any changes to the manufacturing sector for now. But when you look at the first few, right, those sectors, I believe that they have a significant amount of foreign labor, and possibly quite a significant portion of those labor are in China. Yeah. So there is a question that if this rather trying times for some companies, especially those with a lot of labor exposure that is from China, right? Would this be a difficult time for them, given that they are doing what they have already? This was I do know that this is something that was already in pipeline, but given the circumstances, perhaps maybe a delay in conjunction with everybody in the rest of the economy might be a better outcome for now.
Okay, thanks, Alvin. And I think we'll move on to the next topic.